the Roman Empire. Throughout its existence, 144 emperors were crowned on the Roman throne, yet only one of these emperors was captured. He was not only captured, but also humiliated, insulted, and eventually met a horrible death. This is the intriguing story of the Roman Emperor Valerianus, who was captured by the Persians and used as a slave. In 252, if we look at the map of Europe and Asia, we see two gigantic empires dominating a large part of the world. To the east, the Persian Sassanids. To the west, the Roman Empire. Of course, as always, these two states would not fit into the vast world, and swords were drawn to fight. The Sassanid Empire was founded in 224 under the leadership of Ardashir I. After 18 years of rule, he left his son Shapur I a rising state. The Sassanids saw themselves as heirs to the Great Persian Empire, and thus they laid claim to their former possessions, including the Anatolian lands known as Asia Minor. The Roman Empire was far from its former glory at this time. During this period known as the 3rd century crisis, more than 70 emperors had ruled Rome in 100 years. The lack of political stability due to the pressure of the soldiers on the government, prolonged unsuccessful wars, rebellions, famine, and plague were all contributing factors. In other words, the Roman Empire was moving step by step towards collapse, both politically and economically. It was during this time that Emperor Valerianus ascended to the throne. It was 253. Valerianus, who came from a noble Roman family, was proclaimed emperor by the legions in his 50s. When he took over, the Gauls had revolted in the west, the Goths were invading from the north, and in the east, the Persian king Shapur I had invaded Syria, the Armenian lands, and eastern Anatolia. Knowing that he could not deal with all these at the same time, the emperor declared his most trusted son, Valerianus, as the second emperor with the approval of the Senate. Thus, he divided the Roman army into two and sent his son to the west to suppress the Gallic revolts and fight the Goths. He himself marched with the remaining 70,000 troops against the Persians in the east. Catching the Persians unprepared, Emperor Valerianus actually succeeded in the first phase and managed to repel the disorganized Persians by regaining all the lost territories. However, he did not return to Rome as he had anticipated that the Persian king Shapur would come again, and he retreated to the castle of Edessa, that is Sanliurfa today, and waited with his army. But there were some unforeseen surprises for the Romans. The city of Edessa, where they stayed for 1 to 2 years, could not meet the shelter, food, and hygiene needs of so many soldiers, and a plague broke out in the city. Soon the plague spread from Edessa to everyone, both in the legions, and a great loss of life began to occur among the city's inhabitants. At this very moment, news came that the Sassanid ruler Shapur I was approaching the city with a large army. Valerianus could not risk war in the situation. He sent an envoy to the Persian king, who informed him that the Roman emperor wanted to make peace and would pay a good price for it. But Shapur I did not take kindly to this offer. The people of Edessa, on the other hand, thought that the plague that plagued their city was brought by Roman soldiers, and they did not want them in this land. The emperor could foresee that if he retreated without a fight, all of Anatolia would be exposed to a Persian invasion. Moreover, since the rest of the army was under the command of his son Valerianus, who was suppressing rebellions in the west, there was no one to call on for support. Furthermore, every day he hesitated, dozens of his soldiers were dying of the plague, and the army was dwindling in strength and numbers. Therefore, Valerianus decided to leave the fortress and attack the Persians without wasting any more time. In 2060, at the Battle of Edessa, the Persians won a comfortable victory over a Roman army weakened by disease. Emperor Valerianus had to retreat back to Edessa with his remaining army. The Persian army continued its pursuit and laid siege to the city. Trapped in the city of Edessa, the Romans were short of food, struggling with plague, and trying to defend the fortress against the Persians. In short, the situation was not very bright for the Romans. Out of desperation, Emperor Valerianus sent another envoy to the Persian king Shapur and reiterated his desire for peace. The Persian king said that although he was in a very advantageous position in the war, he welcomed the peace proposal and that the Emperor Valerianus should come to meet him alone and unarmed. According to the agreement, the two monarchs were to meet without troops in a neutral area near the city of Edessa. But when the Roman Emperor Valerianus went to the designated area and entered the tent for peace talks, the tent was surrounded by Persian soldiers. The Persian king Shapur I had not kept his word. Thus, the great Roman emperor was taken captive by the Persians. In fact, it is not unprecedented in history for a ruler to be captured, but as we are used to, great rulers would treat the other person well and not persecute him because they considered him their equal. But the Persian king Shapur showed no mercy on the Roman emperor. After the emperor was captured, he became a slave, a servant of the Persian king, and was subjected to many humiliating and degrading acts. So much so that the Persian king even used the Roman emperor as a footstool by stepping on his back when he rode his horse. Shapur I tied Emperor Valerianus in chain and took him everywhere he went and carried him around like a monument of victory. Roman historians have written two different claims about the death of Emperor Valerianus, who lived a bad life of captivity in this way. The first one is that Valerianus told Shapur that he would give Shapur as much gold as he wished in return for freeing him, and the Persian king, who was angry, poured molten gold into the mouth of Emperor Valerianus and had him executed. The other is that Shapur used the emperor as a servant for a while, then flayed him, stuffed him with straw, and displayed him in the Persian temple for a long time, so that his victory over the Romans would not be forgotten. Either way, Valerianus lived a life unbecoming of a Roman emperor and died a bad death. The Sassanid army looted the regions up to central Anatolia and then retreated. The interesting thing is that his son Gallienus, who was on the Western Front, kept his father's captivity a secret from everyone for a year and did not take any steps to rescue him, and declared his reign alone after 1 year.